Our format is we'll ask each of our speakers to spend maybe 5 minutes, and I'm not going to be real meticulous about this, about 5 minutes so on what you know is going on in areas that you're familiar with right now to support space settlements in the future. And I can see from who we have, we've got a diversity of aspects. And again, I'm filling in for Ed McCullough, who's probably, although he hasn't reached me, probably waiting to get on an airplane somehow.
He's here somewhere.
Is he? Okay. Well, if he shows up, then we'll do this kind of. We got an hour to work this out. So the intent is that most of the time of this hour will be allocated for questions, answers, and discussion with the audience. And I'm anticipating by the end of this hour we'll have a rather lively discussion going. All right. Our first speaker, Ron Kohl.
Can you pull up my others?
Other space settlement activities.
Yeah. So this is just that one slide out of my original presentation that has the websites. And so one of the hats I wear is I'm the project manager for the Space Frontier Foundation's Space Settlement Project. If you go to that website and look for Space Settlement, we have a newsletter that we send out, although it doesn't always get received, as we have learned. I'm delighted to have my editor-in-chief of the newsletter, Rick Zucker, here. This is a treat because Rick and I have never met before, although we've been working together for quite some time. There's a couple of things up there that I offer just for your viewing pleasure, really. The Mars Home Project, I know a couple of those people at, is that the group out of MIT?
Yeah, started it.
Yeah, started. The Space Island Project, led by Gene Myers. The next one is a very interesting group, and they conduct an incredibly interesting conference if you're interested in technology and society and how they do or don't play nicely together. They have an annual conference they've had in Baltimore the last couple of years. Joe and I happen to be on the same panel there one time. And it's not just space versus society, it's really science, technology, and society. So they have quite a diversity, and a lot of students are involved, which I think is great. But in particular, there's always one or more tracks devoted to space and society issues. And so again, to me, that's part of that cross-pollinization, multi-discipline thing that I'm a big fan of. And so I'm very supportive of that group and their conference. Of course, I see a bunch of faces that I know from the AIAA Space Colonization Technical Committee, including one of our missing panelists at McCullough. For those of you who don't know, there's the Hylan Mars project up in Devon Island, Canada. It's sort of a Mars simulation in a reasonably unpleasant neck of the woods. One which I am very supportive of and involved in. Oh, okay.
We're being rude.
You are, and you're doing an excellent job. There is an astrosociology community that is evolving. It's really quite brand new. But it's some sociologists who have a passion for space have finally found us rocket scientists also have a passion for space and the social issues. And they have formed a working group within the AIAA technical committee structure. I think they used to be with Life Sciences TC, and they're moving to a different one any day now. But that website tells you pretty much that's sort of the mothership for the astrosociology community. And then also, I think related to space settlements is operations. I think it is hard to simply design a farm if you haven't planned to operate a farm. And I think the same is true for the library and the hotel and the bar and the bowling alley. And so there's a large space ops community. A subset of that is the AIAA Space Ops and Sustainment Technical Committee, but that is actually an international group which I'm not directly and actively involved in, but I plan to be, because they seem to be right up my alley, to be quite frank. So, just sort of a snapshot of some things that I'm aware of that, in my opinion, have, so they're not all about and only about space settlements, but they talk about issues that I think are relevant to the very, very large picture of space settlements. Fred?
Also, NSS has a big settlement site now.
Oh, I haven't been there recently, so thank you. I assume Mark would mention it.
I will mention it now that you brought it up. I wouldn't have mentioned it otherwise.
Oh, what's wrong with you? That's why I didn't mention it.
I see.
So that's those are some of the things that I'm involved in and are of interest to me.
Were you going to talk about Space Frontier Foundation?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the first
Oh,
thing I
okay,
said.
you were going to mention, expect this, sorry. Okay. All right, thank you, Ron. Next speaker, Joe Palaia. We'll let people kind of self-introduce. Ron had already been introduced. We'll let Joe self-introduce.
Hello, everybody. My name's Joe Palaia. I'm the Vice President of the Four Frontiers Corporation. And with regards to space settlement, really what I can talk to is what my company is doing. Four Frontiers is a new space startup, and we are primarily focused on Mars settlement. We've got a development effort underway right now. We have about 35 engineers and scientists that are working with us. And to my knowledge, we are the only commercial venture that is actively investigating Mars settlement design. So we've got the astrosociology group is involved in that effort, as well as technical experts from a number of different disciplines. This is actually our second generation of this, our second go-through. The objective of this effort is, number one, to further our own understanding of the problem and to determine what are the technological areas which need further development. And we are using the materials that we generate from this study to feed into our other business segments. We've got an informative entertainment business segment. We're looking at building a full-scale mock-up of this Mars settlement that will be a tourist attraction and will be as real as we can make it. The idea is to immerse the people that come through this thing in that environment. It's as if they will have been transported to Mars, and use this facility, use this tourist attraction to generate revenue to further the research. Where in the short term, that's kind of a long-term project. In the short term, we're working on a reality TV show concept where we build the initial habitat, the initial temporary hab that comes from Earth, and we put crews of about 6 people inside this thing and run them through a simulation as if they were on Mars. And it'll be a team competition. So we would have, say, 6 men, 6 women, and 3 couples. And they would be competing as teams against each other. And of course, we're looking to have some kind of prize, like a trip into suborbital space for the whole team. And the idea is that we take this habitat that we build and use in the reality TV show, and it becomes a traveling exhibit. So we take it to science centers and museums around the country. So it's like we're building the set for the show, and as an added benefit, we get this traveling exhibit. We're also very active in the education side of things. We're developing some custom curriculum to go into the science classrooms, 6th and 7th grade science classrooms in the state of Florida. We're working with 2 different Polk and Pasco counties. Have already given us commitments to buy our packages and put them in their science classrooms. And the theme of that is going to be living and working on Mars. It's what's going to pull the entire unit together. So we, like I said, we have a number of initiatives underway, and we're actively moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Let's go to Mark Hopkins,
Okay,
who we all know and love.
thank you. I'm not sure dignified, right? But,
Kind.
oh, okay. Anyway, some of the things that NSS is already doing, and I think Ron has sort of covered a large fraction of what other organizations are doing, so I'll just talk about NSS. And I'll talk a little louder since somebody's signaling me in the back that I should do that. First of all, one of the things we've done in the last 6 months or so is the Space Settlement Nexus. What this is an area on our website where we've been pulling together all of the information about space settlements. And this is now the largest and, in my humble opinion, the best area on the internet to find information about space settlements. It's still growing. It's already over 8,000 pages. And so if there's anything you want to know about space settlements, which is something that can be freely published on the net, it's not classified or worse, buried in one of these staff proceedings that you can only get a hold of if you pay $1,000, then it's there.
What's the website?
Go to Google the National Space Society, and it'll be obvious from there. Okay. The second thing, what?
It is. It is
Yeah.
obvious from there.
You can also just Google space settlement. We're now about the 10th on the list when you Google space settlement. That's rising rapidly. We would be higher if it weren't for the fact that we just put the website up. So if you wait a couple of months, we'll be 8th or 7th or 5th. Maybe we can beat you out, Anita. Anyway, another thing that we're doing is we've done in just the last few months is that we've had a Space Act agreement with NASA, and what this does is it creates a partnership between NSS and NASA to promote what was the NASA Ames Space Settlement Design Contest for students. This is a contest which has been running now for 13 years. It's been run by Al Globus, who is a member of our board of directors and chair of our Space Settlement Advocacy Committee. And now it's the NSS NASA Space Settlement Design Contest. And it's for students, and you design space settlements, and there's a team at NASA Ames which judges it. You get some awards from NASA. As part of our contribution, besides publicizing the contest, in order to get more students to enter, we are also giving the grand prize, the grand winners of each year's contest, an award at the ISDC. The award winners this year is a nice team from Turkey, and they'll be receiving the award at tonight's dinner. And Anita is chaperoning all these people around because she runs the other major space settlement with her husband, Dick, runs the other major space settlement design contest. There's actually 2 of them, and we're increasingly working together so that in the future we can really connect all these things together and have a better total thing for pushing these concepts. Another thing that we're doing, I just talked earlier about our art contest, which has created a great number of visuals. We also, and I've also talked about our interaction with the Colony, the TV series Colony. And another thing that we're doing, which I think is particularly important, is we've adopted a basic fundamental business plan of a high-level cooperation with all of the space groups, particularly space settlement-oriented groups. And we are working closely with many of them. We are publishing a book with SSI, Space Studies Institute, AIAA, Space Colonization Technical Committee, of which Anita is a member. In case you didn't notice, it is basically running this track. And then there's ATWIG, Aerospace Technology Working Group, which Hylan's about to talk about, which is this wonderful technical group, which is actually doing a joint conference with us. This is a joint ATWIG NSS conference, and it started 3 days ago. The first 3 days of the conference were dominated by ATWIG. The rest of the conference will be dominated by the National Space Society. The ATWIG is this wonderful, very high-powered technical group, relatively small. And the basic idea is they come up with, but has very similar goals to us. And so the basic idea is they will provide some thought leadership and how to provide and how to actually do a lot of these things in a technical sense. And then NSS will go out and sell these ideas to the public as a whole.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
It's a Hylan talk.
Yeah, Hylan, you want to talk about ATWIG?
I'll tell you what I know.
Okay, that's fair.
I should turn around, I guess. Can I scoot in here?
Which we
This is a good member of that way, so you can get a feel for it. Let me tell you 2 things that brought me here. They asked me to speak. One is, I guess I'm the black hand in 1972 that was the negative pariah in the White House. I was there for the cancellation of the last 2 Apollo missions, for the rescheduling of Apollo 17, the decision on a space shuttle, a few minor elements of the space program. I left the world of being professionally engaged in space policy, went on to a bizarre life in all kinds of other areas. But you never leave this group, because they kept calling me back for the industrialization conference in Disneyland several years ago and things like that. I finally gave up on policy. I don't believe there is anything called policy. And I went back as a CTO of a company, decided to go back to good solid research in the lab. And what did I do? But I made thermoelectric coolers, which are the refrigerators on the space station and the space shuttle. And I met Ken Cox. Ken says, Hylan, you should join ATWIG. What's ATWIG? Well, at that time, ATWIG was a group sponsored by NASA, internal to NASA, that had university and outside, you probably participated in that in that context, I don't know. It wasn't restricted, but it was NASA-sponsored, NASA-supported, and from my assessment of it, it was a technology leveling group. It was a place where people would get together each year and tell what was going on. We've had meetings about twice a year, every year, and I've probably been involved in, about 4 years, 4.5 years. And so you get all these ideas in there. If it were my way, if my way's the right way, and you'll have to, I'll let these two guys correct. I see Atwig doing 3 things simultaneously. One is preserving the passion. Letting people be passionate about their program. Period. Just be passionate. Get up there and talk about space, solar power, talk about this or talk about that, and just be passionate. My theory is it's better to have a room full of energy and then try and guide it than it is to try and generate energy. Okay. The other is technical leveling. A lot of things are going on. My profession right now, I'm a PhD surface chemist. And I don't do a single thing in space projects. I'm not funded by space. I'm always here on my own money. And I think throughout our community, to differing degrees, differing on the discipline, the state of the art and the state of practice are growing apart. And there's so much unutilized science out there that's amazing that we need to harvest that. We need to share with each other where the state of the art is, not where the state of practice is. And there's all kinds of ramifications of that from semiconductors. By the way, semiconductor probably has the least gap, but many other areas it's huge, as in, say, architecture. It's a classic because that's the opening line of a National Academy of Science study on architecture for the future. Boom. The state of the art and the state of practice are too far apart. So leveling technology, while it may seem like just a nicety, is actually much more profound than that. And the third is establishing human settlements off Earth, living beyond Earth. There's going to be a book signing down at the Apogee book, and I'm an author of that book, and everybody in Atwig was an author of one of 42 chapters. But basically where we're focusing, and I think this is where Mark sees the intersection between the two, is not so much on the beautiful endpoint. There's plenty of advocacy for that endpoint. Plenty of arguments that Mark just made most of about why this is beneficial to society. But as I learned it in graduate school, the theory of McCarthy-Adoree says some points you can't get to. You've got to open up some channels. You've got to build some infrastructure. You've got to, I made the point the other day, in World War I, we committed to providing cannons and tanks to our allies in Europe. We never delivered one. We couldn't ramp up. So the notion we can ramp up to do anything is not valid. So the Atwig view seems to be, what are the technological stepping stones? What are the technological horizons? What is the evolution? What is the reusable components? What are the things that we can define, advocate, and do now that begin to build the building blocks so that we could reach the final goal, so that it's not out of our reach when the time comes? And that's my assessment of where Atwig is. Is that fair?
That's perfectly great.
Okay. Great. What I'd like to ask is that we can free up a chair, and while I'm talking, we can kind of cuddle up the chairs and get Hylan back here behind the table for the questions and answers. Okay. All right. I'm here representing both Ed McCullough and Klaus Heiss. I'm not sure where Ed is. I know Klaus was caught in the not being able to get here because almost 400 flights into Dallas were canceled yesterday, and the earliest flight he could get here was a standby on Saturday. So I'm actually representing American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, the AIAA, which is the Technical Society for Aeronautical Engineers. And part of what I'd like folks to understand is the giggle factor on space settlements is behind us. And I actually have evidence. I just started reading this book. It was published in 2005. And Joel Barker is a business author. He wrote a book about business paradigms. Okay, this is called 5 Regions of the Future. He talks about different technologies and how businesses should respond to different technologies. And like I said, I just started reading it. But in the area, that the type of technology called super technology, an example that this very serious business author uses is space settlements. Okay? This is a business book. This is not an advocacy book. It's a business book. And he actually has a little vignette to illustrate what the future can look like of someone writing from a space settlement. This is not the high frontier. This is not colonies in space. This is a business book. So that is an indicator right here that the giggle factor is done. It's time to get down to work. There is serious research in progress right now that will provide precursor technologies to space settlements. We don't have any funding to design any space settlements, but the precursor technologies are starting to fall into place. The foundations, the building blocks, little by little are starting to get built. As Ron mentioned, AIAA, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, has a Space Colonization Technical Committee. Well, so what? AIAA is an organization of technical people, engineers. It is the engineering organization for the aeronautical industry. When you go to AIAA conferences, the people there are Michael Griffin and although sometimes I guess he shows up here too, but you literally get the captains of industry, the heads of the divisions that have to do with aerospace products from Boeing and Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas. These are co-sponsors of conferences. AIAA does its technical business through its technical committees. There are technical committees on aircraft design and history and management, and now there is an AIAA committee, the Space Colonization Technical Committee. So AIAA is taking it seriously as well, with the understanding that if you're going to be building the foundation now, whatever you're building, you need to understand what you're building a foundation for. And that's what the SCTC, the Space Colonization Technical Committee, is looking at, is what do we need to be working on now, or understanding the future so that we can establish a foundation right now that will support that. Now, I just wrote a note as we were talking here. Actually, Space Colonization Technical Committee got an inquiry recently also from a British science television series wanting to do a program on space settlement. So this is a global thing. AIAA Space Colonization Technical Committee currently puts together tracks at 2 technical conferences. One, the AIAA Space Conference, and I say space, it was Space 2003, 2004, Space 2006 was last year in San Jose, Space 2007 this year is in Long Beach, California. That is a place where you see executives, and there is a track on space colonization in that conference. So this is serious stuff. Another one that has tracks on space settlements, and I think we run, 10 sessions? And we have more than enough papers to fill 10 sessions of 4 papers per session, is the Space Technology and Applications International Forum in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's every February in Albuquerque. Actually run by the American Institute of Physics, and AIAA is a co-chair. But you will find technical papers mostly on in situ resource utilization, but also on mining and refining techniques, construction techniques. Astrosociology is showing up in some of those sessions, robotics, lower cost transportation, electrical power production, anything that might be part of the infrastructure we require for space settlements in the future. And as Mark mentioned, there are design contests and competitions to get high school students or students interested in space settlements. And there will actually be a presentation in this track a little bit later on this afternoon on that. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So there's serious stuff going on right now. Okay, the panel members have all had our little introductions. And now we're welcoming about half an hour of questions from the audience and audience discussion / participation. Go for it.
I got a question for you. You mentioned that there's a lot of papers that have been written by the members of the AIA. Are they available to the general public?
Ooh, especially STAFE charges a lot of money for the proceedings. So if you know somebody, you can borrow. AIAA is AIAA a little bit more open?
They have never, I think, You still pay for them.
Yeah, you can pay for papers one at a time. You can get the conference proceedings for, it's usually like hundreds of dollars for the
Yeah.
CD for everything.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you just join the IAA, which I think you don't particularly have to have a engineering degree to do, I think they'll let you.
Yeah, it's an
then-
associate membership, yes.
Then you can get the web access, which will allow you to download the PDFs for free, any of them that they have available.
Okay, good answer, thank you.
The second question I have is, is anybody on the panel aware of the space group within the U.S. Chamber of Commerce? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Are they active? I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they have a website.
Okay.
They're obviously very commerce driven, a big part of the Chamber of Commerce. They have, I can never remember the exact name of their group, but if you go to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you can find them. That's how I always find them. And they sponsor events on Chamber of Commerce-like things, very much related to space.
Okay, good.
It's probably not, I would be surprised, to be quite frank, if you found space settlement-related issues, but you certainly see space commerce, and as I tried to convince you earlier, space commerce will be a big driver for space settlements, so you sort of connect the dots yourself.
You have to start someplace.
Absolutely. But no, they have a very active and, I'm told, large group focused on interest in space.
You know, looking at those proceedings, which get more lengthy every year, more and more programs, and yet it's all, in a sense, scattershot.
Yes.
Professor X is doing this narrow thing, Professor B is doing that narrow thing, and I'm wondering if out there in all this great wealth of bright people, there's anybody outside of NASA who's actually sort of in charge of integrating this, putting it on the board and saying, okay, this we filled in, this is empty, this is filled in, this is how this relates to that, here's what it all looks like, our current knowledge database, here's what we have to do next. NASA is obviously doing some of its own work. They have a limited budget, there are a certain number of people working on it. They have limited amount of time to go review other people's work, and they certainly aren't real big about sharing their work on post-2020 under like the McMurdo Sound basically approach. So the question is there anybody out there who is trying to integrate this knowledge and put it in a usable format? And we know the state of the art in space settlement, we know what needs to be focused on, so one can even advocate it.
I don't know of anyone.
I do.
Oh, good, I'm so glad you're up here.
Well, the reason is, until you hate us, that's what the stepping stones are, and thought leadership. I wrestled for this past 4.5 years with your very idea.
But I'm trying not to reinvent that wheel, go ahead.
No, the whole point is, not only do you have a proliferation of participants, you have a lot of internal conflict between participants arguing their approach is better. And one thing you learn if you're ever an OMB in the White House is that when people in a community argue against each other in public, they draw the whole community down. And so scientists, when challenge each other in public, you just diminish the whole community. So there's no real public forum for having the controversy that sorts all this out. We propose the, well, there's another point I want to raise too. We're kind of looking at the fact that there's two kinds of technology that are critical in reaching an endpoint that Mark laid out. And that is there's physical technology, it's the ability to build a camp and put Southern Indiana into it. The other is social technology. And if you look at any successful technical venture in this country, you'll find that social technologies were more important almost than the physical technologies. The classic example to me is the semiconductor industry. The great innovation in social technology in the semiconductor industry is this international roadmap, where it brings the suppliers of equipment into alignment with the users of the equipment. It allows for pre-competitive research among all the competitors. It allows for establishing goals and objectives, which they all lie about, because they try and extend it out there so it'll slow everybody else down and they try and beat it. But it's one of the most remarkable things, and I know because I was involved in very setting that up. And so that's one. The second thing is technology is important or valuable based on the context in which you look at it. Maybe many of the technologies necessary for the vision you just saw aren't here today. we don't have any way to evaluate them in that context. And then if you take the concept I raised earlier, there being a gap between the state of knowledge and the state of the art and the state of practice, there's a whole array of possible things that are possible right today, but no one knows how to reach them, get them, incorporate them in their process.
Typically, in the past, the way that's been accomplished is by various authors who go out and read well what others have done on, off them, and they eventually become the integrators, but it's a long, drawn-out
Well, as
process.
you peer review papers, which I'm still doing, you run into that. And I want to make one last point. So we coined, I wrote a paper, got a lot of positive feedback, still doing around what to do about it, called Stepping Stones. Stepping stone being, the first stepping stone would be how far is our technical vision today? What can we do within that? And quantitatively and qualitatively, we define all the stuff that you asked. But that won't get you there. There'll be a next evolution where there'll be a different, and now we go from pointed science to kind of operational research. And we look at the next domain. And we start looking at all the literature and all the papers that are published. We start distilling out the things that make sense in this block and in this block. That's what I think you would hear. I raise the idea, everyone thinks it's great, doing it is another issue. But the point is, you have to do it.
Takes time.
So these suggestions of how to get something to do it?
No, you gotta do it yourself. If you're the owner of the passion, you gotta do it. There's no they. There's no they in this world. If you don't do it, it won't get done. I mean, that's simply.
That's limited to a subset of those who understand what they're reading. That's the thing, the important that needs to be done.
No, but the more important thing is not what you're reading, it's what did the author mean when he wrote it, because most of these guys are so inarticulate, you can't understand what the hell they're talking about.
What did you say?
The situation we're in, what you're describing kind of reminds me of the excellent PBS show Connections. What we need is something that's written in hindsight, and he's got the benefit of history and a lot of research to put together the pieces that led to the discovery of this, that, or the other, and ways in which all of these elements were necessary before that particular invention could take place. What we need is to have someone now that is creating connections before it happens and conveying that information to the public.
The beginning of wisdom I have for me, I'm sorry.
You're doing great.
It's my thesis right now. I'm noted for oversimplifying complex situations. Is that with the web, we're creating a world that's going to know everything and understand nothing. All right? We forgot how to connect dots. We just take knowledge of this piece and this piece and this piece and say, ah, problem solved. No way. And how do you make these things play together? And how do you make them interface? The interface management is a crisis in material science. It's a crisis everywhere else.
It sounds like every course is becoming a survey course, a mile wide and an inch deep. No individual research, no really analysis in depth.
Well, we never use no's and all that, but you're right, it's thematic. There are individuals here, there, and everywhere that recognize these things.
Okay, we have a question here, and then we'll go to Fred, and then we'll be able to take more questions. Go ahead.
If the public acceptance for space settlements is moving along incrementally, and the technology is moving along incrementally, are we going to reach some point where we have critical mass here and we launch an Apollo-style program where we have that kind of national commitment that we throw all our resources in there and push the technology and just drive towards one goal?
Not until the public sentiment is much broader and much deeper.
And let me offer an alternative to that concept, because I think we're at the tipping point where, for the first time in the history of space, it's not just a government-only game. And as I alluded to in my presentation, I think we should prepare for and perhaps plan for the greedy capitalistic bastard community to come and take profit and greed and become the driver for humans getting off this rock. And, you know, I have this opinion that the private launch and human hauler industry might beat NASA to wherever they're going with their CEV and their launchers. And it seems to me it's a fair fight now. So it's not quite an equal playing field, but it's much closer. And And in lieu of a Manhattan project or an Apollo project, if we could sort of lighten up on the commercial industry and let them go do what they're very good at doing, you know, they could send up a drilling team here and a ice processing team there and a orbital debris cleaning team to clear the roads a little bit up in low Earth orbit, and for a fair fee, maybe a lucrative fee, but for a fee nevertheless, so that they can satisfy their stockholders and their investors. Why not let the capitalists do what the capitalists are very good at doing, namely creating jobs and providing services that for which there's a customer base, and out of that, in my opinion, you get settlements by de facto.
Now, actually, my response to that is in the next hour, we have a presentation on triggering events, and I'll give my take on that, but I'd like Joe to answer that, because clearly there's a trigger for Four Frontiers.
You know, I was about to say that I think before you can get the public to support space settlements, I think you need to have the public know what the heck a space settlement is. I think if you go and ask many kids today, what's a space settlement, they won't have a clue. And I think that you know, one of the things that Four Frontiers is doing is trying to use entertainment as a method to inform, to get that message across that space settlements are something that's interesting, that will be fun to learn about, and to generate some revenue.
I think the most likely situation is some combination of all preceding. I think the thing which really jazzes me and makes me optimistic about all this is there's a substantial number of really smart people that are very dedicated to this concept, either dedicated in the sense of making money or dedicated because they, in a more philanthropic sense, or some combination of the two. And these people are working very hard to bring this about, and far more competent people working about to do this now than were, say, 2 or 3 years ago. And that is a very, very helpful sign.
Fred has a question.
Yeah, my thought still maybe helps here about this idea with that connection series. There's another cool series here in America about the computer industry and the PC industry by Robert Crinchley. I don't know if anybody has ever seen that. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It makes all these connections, history of the PC industry, and then how the internet industry happened. And I think he's the PBS. Maybe you could make something like his show, or else him himself get him interested in space or something. It was kind of unique.
What was it was getting the experts in front of the public and that kind of a thing?
It was a history of the PC industry by interviewing people that did it, making the connections, how one led together, and the same thing was going to happen in the space industry. History has been made of it. Robert Crinchley.
Could I?
The name
pick up
again?
the point you
Robert
made?
Crinchley?
Yeah.
Crinchley? K?
You made the point about incremental advances. My concept of stepping stones, and I would hope it makes sense, I don't know, but is that in this stepping stone, you make incremental advances. You go to the next horizon, you're going to have model changes. You can have a very valid commercial industry in low Earth orbit. You'll never develop the technologies for human presence in space. So we have to be incremental to build the building blocks to allow this to happen. But we're going to have to somewhere, there'll be some technology breakthroughs, which we'll have to recognize not only what that breakthrough is, but the empowering technology to go with it. And that will create the next level of, if you will, stepping stone. And that will be a horizon that goes out 5 years or so, 10 years or so. And so I don't necessarily feel you can increment your way to Mark's pictures.
But you talked about the stepping stones as one person with the passion has to do it himself. I'm talking about one nation.
That wasn't what I meant by stepping stone. I don't believe any one nation can do it. But I also want to say something which I just kind of believed in lately. We can solve all these problems. We can solve the environment. We can solve the world food problem. We can solve the water problem. We can solve the health problem. And we can do settlements. There's enough richness in this world to accomplish these things. But, you know, we got 2 billion people that got to come up to 1974, that are still living in the equivalent of the Dark Ages. And so we got a lot of problems on this globe to deal with, which will create the political environment, which then we can go ahead and build this next level. And I think Mark picked up on some of that, I mean, in our conversation, that you've got to realize that we're going to evolve, but it will have discontinuities where we really jump. We're going to have to do that to be able to build all those devices out there.
Yeah, the human race in general moves forward both incrementally and then on occasion makes a big jump. And so both are important.
They also have the history of being making big jumps backwards too.
And on occasion it makes a jump backwards, but it's clear that the trend is positive.
Okay, I see 3 questions, yellow shirt, a gold jacket, and then this, okay, so we'll do them in that order, and that, we've got about 18 minutes left.
It's more a comment.
Go for it.
I was going to say, I think the reason people think that we have to solve problems on Earth before we can go into space, because they think it's a choice that has to be made. The reason they think it's a choice is they assume that it's going to be a spending program by the government, and everybody knows there's only so much money to go around. And it's because people have the assumption, oh, it's going to be it's either Apollo again or it's a Manhattan Project, and that's why I think what your point was the key thing. The reason I still don't like a lot of the artwork I see about space colonies, including the new ones, is that it all looks very utopian and clean. And what I don't see is something that looks like a real city. What would make it look like a real city is if all those buildings had signs on like Walmart and Home Depot and McDonald's Arches and that kind of. Seriously, look at all. It looks very like the government built it as this project. But why would the public ever support spending so many resources to make a home for just 10,000 people or something? It'll never work that way. It'd have to be a real estate developer that builds those colonies someday, and they'll do it because they've got the business tenants and investors and that kind of thing building things just the way they do here on Earth.
I think it's a fallacy to think that you ever will be able to solve all the problems on this planet.
Right.
I think that there will always be new problems that emerge. And so if we wait to go into space, and to settle space until we have solved the problems here on Earth, we'll never go. I think that the effort of going out there and trying new things, taking new approaches to old problems and to new problems, I think that is what will help solve many of the problems we have here on Earth.
Yeah, following up on that, one way because the point you raised does come up, we're going to solve the problems on Earth first. My answer to that is, why not solve all the problems in Spain before you come to the United States? The truth of the matter is, the problems in Spain are much worse than they are in the United States, and it's also true that the fact that people came to the United States has made Spain a much nicer place to live than it otherwise would be, but it hasn't solved all the problems. And that's true with this sort of thing. This will not solve all the problems of just Spain, but it will make the world a lot better place.
Okay. Just like to hear some of the comments on the various panel members on how settlements will pay their way.
They won't.
They have to produce something to be able to survive. They're going to have to import goods. How are they going to raise the necessary capital with what they're doing?
My answer to that in the long run is that the vast majority of the resources in the solar system are in space rather than on the Earth. And so the immediate market is tapping into these resources, either in terms of materials or of energy. There's other things as well, such as knowledge, et cetera. And once you have humans out there, that will create markets in space. But the big thing that space has that the Earth doesn't have, in sort of a long-lived sense, is an enormous amount of resources.
I agree with that part of it, but the question is,
Part
how do you pay off in the short term?
Part of it, we don't know. For instance, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, his plan was to bring spices back from India and get rich that way. Well, he didn't quite get to India. And then the Spanish thought, well, let's bring gold back from the New World. And, well, but that's not our major export now. And then the Russians said, let's bring furs back from the New World. That's not our major export now. So my personal sense, based on history, is we don't know what that golden economic, that economic product will be that will cause an explosion of infrastructure in space and an economic imperative to go out there and exploit those resources. You want something that you can make in space and either sell in space or profitably return to Earth and use on Earth. And until we get out there and see how we can manufacture, what we can manufacture with the materials there and the environment there, it's hard to know what that will be. Okay. Maybe we can make ropes of nanotubes that we can't make here. I don't know. I'm not sure what it'll be.
It is an important question. Like, you know, the English were over 100 years behind the Spanish, even though North America was sitting here unsettled, you don't count the Native Americans. And the fundamental reason they were 100 years behind the Spanish is because nobody could figure out how to make a profit out of places like Jamestown and Plymouth Rock and Plymouth. In fact, the only way Plymouth came about is because the people who went there for religious reasons, and they basically paid their own way. It wasn't because of the exports that went home, although that was not irrelevant. What I'm saying is that given what's there, given the wealth, just like there was in North America, eventually somebody's going to figure out how to make a profit out of it, or some other way to exploit it.
I think initially the objective is not to make windfall gains. I think initially the objective should be to try to break even. And I think one of the best ways to try to accomplish that is to leverage the local resources. We're saying space has all these resources, let's make use of them. You know, at Four Frontiers, when we look at Mars settlement, the thing that drove us to Mars was that the resources are there. We can set up the industrial capabilities to make use of those, to make building materials, to resupply the habitat. And if you can make use of those local resources, obviously the amount of material that you need to import from Earth is much less. The amount of material you have recurring that has to be imported from Earth is much less, and therefore the cost is less.
Let me make one comment and to sort of offer a counterpoint to your, what seems like a good goal, and that is we have settlements here in America like Detroit and Los Angeles and St. Louis who are not paying their own way. They run deficit budgets. Large cities do this more regularly probably than anybody would like, and it doesn't seem to be ruffling a whole lot of feathers in general. So while that certainly is, you know, sort of being self-sustaining, you know, financially is a great goal, we don't have a great track record here in the U.S. among, you know, not counting international. So.
Well, you're talking government entities, though.
Right.
There's private companies that do make a profit that are paying the way for those municipalities.
So again, there's a good model to consider. Okay, so you know, the Hudson Bay Company wasn't all bad. It wasn't all good, but it wasn't all bad.
Right.
And you had a question here.
Once through a successful integration effort, we've identified the technological and engineering holes in our current knowledge of what's necessary to make a space element work. What, in the panel's view, would be the best way to address those holes and fill them in? Would it be something like NASA's Centennial Challenges, maybe a private equivalent like the X Prizes, or what do you see the road to those advances being made that we would identify are necessary to put everything together?
I think that's too static a model. I don't think we'll know what the holes are. But we know what some of the stepping stones are, and what are those technological obsolescence rates. I was the author of something the Pentagon knows as the PQ guide. It was pre-planned product improvement. It was recognizing the technological obsolescence rate, where's the growth going to come from, where's it going to go. Furthermore, there's many futures that are approachable by this approach. Maybe we don't get to the one that Mark put up to, but we get to a community in Mars of 20. And you know, then we stall out or something. But the point is, the first steps, the first building blocks are going to be the same, regardless of the future, which one of the ultimate futures. But one thing we know for sure, none of them are going to stay where we are.
I think that you're not going to be able to identify all of those holes in our knowledge until you actually go to do it. I think that you can identify many of them up front. I'll give one example. We know that landing large payloads on Mars is a problem. We don't know how to do it yet. With regards to how do we attack these holes, I think the first step is identifying. And so, you know, one of the outputs of what Four Frontiers has done with their design effort is to identify as many of these holes as we can. And if you put that out there in front of the public, in front of the scientific community, and say, look, these are the problems which need to be solved, I think there are enough people out there that are looking to solve problems.
And I would only add that all the things you suggested or proposed, and more that we haven't thought of yet, will be those mechanisms. So You know, it'll be various motivating factors from the quest for knowledge to the quest for money and some combos in between. I think that'll get us, again, farther down the road. Whether we get to the end game or not is sometimes not as important as, you know, making progress if you can figure out that you're not going backwards.
I think Joe and Bob Zuber adequately answered his question. These things won't hold fulfilled until you have a goal. This is what I want to do. Then they work backward. What do I have to know to do it? And then all of a sudden get these giant leaps to get there. But the question I wanted to address is the one on this self-sufficiency stuff and paying for itself. Yes, Columbus was looking for spices, then they changed to gold, and the Russians did beaver. But the point was, and all these ideas turned out to be wrong in the long term. But the fact was, in the short term, at least people thought that there was a business plan. They thought there was a way to make money. The fact of the matter is, right now, two things. Number one, most of the people here think it's important to build space for its own merit. We want to have human colonies off Earth, something else just for survival. We think that having human colonies off Earth is beneficial to society back home, no matter what. Doing that is valuable regardless of whether it's done by government or done by private enterprise. Now, the government can do it for societal reasons, even if doesn't pay for any individual or any individual economic unit. They do it because it's important. But for private enterprise to do it, they have got to at least have in their own minds, here is a way we can make our money back and make a big profit, and we can make it worth waiting until we get it. Now, NSS has had long-standing, sitting out there, something called the NSS Challenge. They said, okay, we talked about space being self-supporting and what the commercial interests do it, and get out of the way they can do it. And we said, all right, show us any hypothetical way a lunar colony can pay for itself. Either A, amortizing all the development costs, or even if you write them all off and start from scratch, show us a way a lunar colony can make money. Until you do that, you will not have private enterprise going from Spaceship 1 to Lunar 1 to get to the moon. They need to know that they can get money. And right now, all we know is that maybe you could sell astronomy information from a manned Farside Observatory to science institutions. Maybe you could do certain vacuum experiments that people are paying to do on ISS. But nothing, maybe you could send some moon dust back to make jewelry. But nothing we have seen that comes close to attracting all these venture capitalists we see out here, all these bright entrepreneurs, and saying, the only reason we're not getting the moon is because NASA won't do it right, is that they don't have anything in front of them to say, yeah, we can do it, we can make money at it. Not on the table, guys.
Actually,
let's have our faith that someone will show up.
Especially for the moon, that there probably is an answer that's kind of staring us in the face. And it's the same one that is the basis of 80% of the economy of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Sure.
It's tourism.
Somebody's got to run the numbers and say that they can do it. But if they did that, they'd be building their rockets right now.
Yeah,
At the moment,
tourism,
they don't see it.
It may not cause settlement. On the other hand, if you get enough people going to a place for tourism, an infrastructure needs to build up around the tourists.
Hotel workers have to go somewhere.
That's right, exactly. So as soon as you start getting hotels, hotel workers, and rovers to go around, and then you need gas stations, and then on and on and on, and restaurant workers, and those people that Ron was talking about, the people who are collecting the garbage and doing the cleaning and maintaining the toilets and all of those things. So in a perverse sort of way, tourism could, just like it is for Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, could be a way to get, if the numbers work out.
Clearly, nobody thinks the numbers work out at this point.
No, that's not true. There are quite a few people who will argue various positions as to making the numbers work out. Jack Schmidt, our speaker on Sunday, has a book that he put out last year, where he argues the numbers will work out for his using three hypotheses. That doesn't mean he's right. Dennis Wingo has a book out that says that the numbers work out for platinum group metals, exporting them from the moon and bringing them back. Doesn't mean he's right, but there's a lot of people that have various business plans in a general sense of doing this, and so in some sense that's an answer to your question. No, you can't really prove that one of these plans works if you actually do it, which is going to happen.
You've got to have it sound enough that people have the money to think it will work. Now, I can propose lots of good ideas, but I can't show some entrepreneurs worth $30 billion to do it if you're going to get back $80 billion.
I think you're looking for the magic bullet here, and I don't think that we're ready to answer that question. At least with Four Frontiers, we're doing some of the early things, some of the ways that we can make money right here and now on Earth that will prepare us to answer those questions later.
That's true. You're hoping to fill in some of the blanks that may be just enough to get an entrepreneur to say, well, it's one less thing I have to overcome, now I can do it. But at the moment.
The speaker,
But I'm not trying to raise money for
No,
Wilmar Settlement
that's
right now.
That's right, you're not.
and the speaker at lunch was talking about a group who's already, his company's already doing tourists to the International Space Station. He was talking about a plan which he alludes to being pretty close to being nailed down, to send a tourist on for $100 million on a trip around the moon. And so if that happens, well, there's your first paying thing for going east of the vicinity.
The Russians already have one, someone who wants to do that.
Well, he said that there are people of interest, but they haven't signed the dotted line yet, but he implied it was close.
That would be a cislunar,
Right.
but not so far short of what you, so.
Okay, my watch says we can either take one short question or have closing statements from each of the panel members. Do the panel members want to?
It's your call.
Anybody have a short question?
Well, I'd like to make a statement. I have a completely alternate view towards getting there from what you expressed. Maybe it's the aircraft, I don't know. But I believe that to get to the first or second tier of these stepping stones, we're going to have government and industry collaboration. And to do that, I think we have to show that every incremental step of new function enables the solution of problems like this on Earth, and it has an impact on life on Earth itself. And I think that can be done. We had the Indian chairman of the Indian Space Agency that we day before yesterday, and he gave a long and passionate presentation about how they have done an econometric model, the only one ever done in any country in the world, of the economic benefits in managing terrestrial problems from space. And so I think that the funnel to get to the first launching platform for what Ron would talk about has to be a partnership. Now, it can't be NASA-centric. NASA won't get you there. So you have to think broadly about how you accomplish it. And so I believe that model, while it doesn't take you to the end point, does get you to a launching platform.
I show we have 1 minute before the close, and actually I think I'd rather use that time to get set up for the next presentation. So I'd like to thank all of the panel members and all of the audience for making it a